Hi, Lou Pulsfer here, and I'm going to talk about why I wrote my game design book. And the first question, of course, is why would you write a book? This is the 21st century. People don't read books anymore. Well, that's not quite true, but I don't think they read books, nonfiction books, to learn very much, even in formal classes. I'm a retired college teacher, and I was finding toward the end of my time that students simply would not buy a textbook, especially if it was expensive. They figured they would get along without it. It's all part of the just enough to get by zeitgeist of the time. In fact, more book titles are published every year, but fewer copies of each one are sold. And that includes fiction and nonfiction. Nonetheless, a book is the best concentrated way to learn. It's a treasure trove of information for people who are willing to make the effort. And despite the notion that everything is on the internet for free, that's not true. And books also put things together in a way that you're not going to find if you just get a little bit of a thing here and a bit there and a bit another place. There's a theme and a focus running through it. So I decided to write a book. Why a game design book? Aren't there lots of game design books? Yes, there are, but I found that none of them were really satisfactory. Most game design books are about video games only. For vidiots, in other words, as Greg Costikyan calls it. And I wanted a book that was about all kinds of games, not just video games. Most game design books say little about what you actually do, so when the reader gets done and asks himself or herself, but what do I do? They still don't know. Or they think they know, but what they're thinking about is the marketing information or what you do to get funding for a game, which is not designing a game. It's convincing somebody to give you money, which is part of the business of game design. Well, I wanted to write about game design, not the business of game design. They're two separate things. Another thing is that an awful lot of game design books are monstrously long and very expensive. Well, my observations of young people especially was you show them a long book and that's the end of it. They won't even try. If it's a shorter book, then maybe they'll give it a go. But a long book, not a chance. And if it's an $80 book, not a chance. And the other problem with some game design books, especially ones about tabletop games, is they're written by a bunch of people. There's 15 or 20 authors, and that makes for a very choppy and uneven book. I wanted to provide one author's voice. So that's what I did. I stuck to the size of an average novel, which is 90 to 100,000 words, and this book is 100,000 words. It's not 250,000, 300,000, 250,000 as many game design books are. A good side effect of keeping the book small is that I focused entirely on game design and didn't discuss the business of game design and marketing except in little bits where it was necessary. Someday I'll write another book on the business of game design, but I'll probably make an audiovisual class first because it is the 21st century and audiovisual classes are becoming more and more popular because people can listen and look and not have to read. Reading requires effort, and a lot of people don't want to put in the effort. I also wanted to write a book from a teaching perspective as somebody who's been a teacher for a long time and who also taught game design. Game design teachers know that when you have to start learning to design games, you don't start with video games, you start with non-electronic games because you can focus on the game design and you can change things rapidly, neither of which you can do when you're trying to make video games. And that also gave me an excellent reason to include tabletop games in the book. But even though it's from a teaching perspective, it's from the perspective of one person teaching another person. It's not a textbook. it doesn't have the paraphernalia of textbooks, questions and lookups and so on and so forth. Few people voluntarily read textbooks. Textbooks are written for a captive audience. They're really written for the instructor, not for the students. Well, I wanted to write a book for the people who are learning, not for me. And when I teach, I have to say I rarely used actual textbooks. I tried to use books that people would go into a bookstore and actually buy voluntarily to read. And that's what I tried to write. So I wrote the book as I was talking directly with the reader. I don't give the view from 50,000 feet. And I offer my experience to the reader. And I've had half a dozen games published. I've written tons of magazine and web articles, 17,000 classroom hours of teaching, and I've been a gamer for over 50 years. So I have a lot of experience to offer. Here is a chapter list. And of course you can pause the video and look at this further if you want. There's a full table of contents at that URL at the bottom, which is case sensitive. And the full table of contents is 3 or 4 pages because there are several sections in each chapter. The book is available in paperback. The list price is $38. You can get it from the publisher. You can get it on online sites like Amazon. If you happen to be going to Gen Con, you can get it discounted from the publisher who exhibits at Gen Con. And some libraries will also have it because the publisher sells a lot of books to libraries. There are electronic formats, and they are lower priced than the paper, sometimes much lower. There's Kindle at Amazon, Nook at Barnes & Noble, EPUB at Books A Million, but you may have to hunt for that, and they may also say it's a PDF. It's most unlikely ever to be in hardcover. Here are some excerpted reviews as put together by the publisher. And on the next slide, I'll show 3 full reviews by gamers. The URLs so that you can look those up if you want. There they are. And if you're looking for the book, looking for game design might not be quite good enough. The full title of the book is Game Design: How to Create Video and Tabletop Games Start to Finish. And that's a compromised title. You're not actually creating a video game start to finish. You can do it with tabletop games. But the point is, and the point I make in the book, the most important thing that an aspiring game designer can do is make and complete games. You have to complete the games. It doesn't help if you stop partway through. It doesn't mean it's going to be a really great game, but if it's a decent game and you've got it all the way through, then that's what really matters for your development.